Imagine a weapon so terrifyingly clever that a single silent dart punctures a man's skin, and within minutes he collapses of a heart attack. No bullet hole. No gunshot sound. No sign of struggle. Just a quiet, natural death as if fate had struck. Now imagine that this weapon was developed by one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, and once made public, it shocked senators, journalists, and the world. This is the story of the CIA's heart attack gun, revealed to the world in 1975, a Cold War assassination tool born of paranoia, secrecy, and lethal ambition. When World War II ended in 1945, the world didn't step into peace. It stepped into a new battlefield. A battlefield without flags, without trenches, without any declaration of war. A battlefield built from secrets, influence, and paranoia. The Cold War was not fought with tanks rolling across Europe. It was fought in whispers. It lived in rooms where no camera existed, where conversations were never recorded, where decisions changed nations without ever appearing in newspapers. At the heart of this invisible conflict were two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, locked in a race for dominance that touched everything. Technology, science, ideology, space, weapons, culture, and worst of all, human lives. Every victory in this silent war didn't just mean power, it meant survival. Every defeat didn't just mean embarrassment, it meant extinction. That fear shaped decisions the public would not understand for decades. The CIA, established in 1947, was more than a spy agency. It became the sharp edge of American strategy. Its mission went far beyond gathering information. It intervened in elections, overthrew governments, disrupted revolutions, and confronted enemies who never appeared on a battlefield. But as the Cold War evolved, so did the tools. At first, conflict was about intelligence reports, coded telegrams sent from smoky embassies in Eastern Europe. Then it became about covert influence, propaganda disguised as news, false voices placed in opposition movements. Then it advanced into psychological warfare, where ideas were weapons, capable of tearing nations from the inside. And eventually, darkness deepened, and the war entered biology, chemistry, and death. Because the Soviets were doing the same. Behind closed doors across the world, scientists tested weapons designed to never be detected, poisons that evaporated after killing, gases that left no trace, methods of psychological manipulation that broke minds without leaving scars. Both sides built laboratories where science was separated from morality. Both sides recruited doctors, chemists, physicists, and operatives willing to design the unthinkable. There was a chilling logic behind this race. If assassination could be disguised as a heart attack, then conflict could be erased completely. No political fallout. No accusations. No martyrdom. Just a sudden tragedy. He died of natural causes. Within this invisible battlefield, assassinations were not dramatic Hollywood moments. No rooftop sniper. No dramatic chase. No cinematic finale. They were silent, clinical, precise. An asset defects in Berlin? He collapses in a hotel lobby. A politician in South America turns against Western interests? He dies in his sleep. A scientist in Eastern Europe looks ready to share secrets with the enemy? Heart failure. And nobody asks questions. To understand how the CIA could even imagine a weapon capable of triggering a heart attack without evidence, you have to step into the mindset of the era. The Cold War was not a war of battles, it was a war of secrets. It was a war where silence was a battlefield and science was a loaded gun. In meeting rooms hidden beneath government buildings, committees debated assassination methods that left no political fingerprints. The goal wasn't murder, the goal was plausible deniability. A public execution creates outrage. A bullet creates a headline. But a heart attack, a stroke, a sudden collapse? That creates a funeral, and then it disappears. Inside these circles, morality was often a luxury. The logic was cold. If the enemy has a weapon without trace, so must we. If the Soviets could kill with toxins, the CIA must be able to do the same. If there is even a possibility someone could destroy the West with a silent method, America needed that method first. This mindset wasn't born out of cruelty. It was born from fear. Fear that if the United States didn't use every tool available, it would lose a war that the public didn't even realize was happening. So science became darker. Experiments pushed boundaries. Lines blurred. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA's research wings, especially the most secretive branches of technical services, pursued ideas that most scientists would never dare publish. They questioned, could a bullet be fired without sound? Could a toxin evaporate after entering the bloodstream? Could a dart leave no wound? Could death look natural even under a microscope? And chillingly, the answer to many of these questions was yes. By the early 1970s, the CIA had weapons that didn't look like weapons, disguised as umbrellas, fountain pens, cigarette boxes, cameras, even walking sticks. But among all of these hidden devices, one stood apart, not because it was technologically complex, but because it was psychologically devastating. A gun that kills with a heart attack. A weapon that replaces violence with silence. A tool that erases evidence the moment it's fired. A design that transforms assassination into an invisible event. And it remained unknown, a secret buried under layers of classification, until a historic moment in 1975, when a U.S. Senate committee dared to ask, what has our government created in the shadows? That question, and the answer that followed, would stun the world. In the early 1960s, while the world celebrated the dawn of the space age, another revolution was happening far from public view, in small, restricted laboratories housed inside government compounds, where windows were sealed and doors required multiple levels of clearance. Here, the CIA's Technical Services Division, known internally as Division D, pursued a chilling mission, to turn biology into a weapon. This wasn't the realm of traditional guns or explosives. This was the frontier of toxin warfare, using nature's own poisons to achieve what bullets could not, kill without leaving a trace. The agency had already experimented with exotic compounds extracted from plants, shellfish, and insects. They studied venoms that shut down organs, toxins that paralyzed the lungs, and chemicals that caused seizures with no visible damage. But one substance stood above the rest: shellfish toxin, specifically a compound known as saxitoxin, derived from microscopic algae found in contaminated seafood. Saxitoxin had properties that scientists described as terrifyingly perfect for covert use. It was lethal in tiny quantities. It acted rapidly once in the bloodstream. It caused heart failure and respiratory collapse. And crucially, it was nearly impossible to detect in the 1960s and 70s. It didn't leave burns. It didn't leave bruises. It didn't alter the skin. It shut down the body from the inside, silently. Even advanced autopsies without special training would show what appeared to be a natural heart attack. The CIA asked a chilling question. If a man collapses on the street from cardiac arrest, will anyone suspect murder? To deliver this toxin, the agency needed a mechanism that didn't look like a weapon at all. Something that could be carried anywhere, hidden in plain sight, drawn in a moment, and fired without noise. The answer was a device that looked more like a prop from a spy novel than a real instrument of death. It was a small, modified pistol, powered by compressed gas rather than gunpowder. There was no gunshot, no smoke, no flash. When fired, it made nothing more than a soft sound similar to a cough. Instead of bullets, it fired a tiny frozen dart, smaller than a grain of rice, coated in concentrated toxin. The dart was sharp enough to pierce clothing, and the entry wound was so tiny that it closed almost immediately, leaving no visible hole. By the time the victim felt anything at all, the toxin would already be flowing through their bloodstream. Within seconds, the target would begin experiencing dizziness, chest pressure, sudden disorientation, and then their heart would simply stop. A witness would see a tragic, sudden medical emergency. A doctor would pronounce cardiac arrest, and the assassin, standing right beside the crowd, would quietly walk away, the weapon already hidden. To understand how the CIA perfected a weapon like this, you must picture the environment of Division D. These were not wild scientists with reckless ambitions. They were highly trained military researchers, experts in biochemistry, weapons engineering, and clandestine operations, operating with the highest national clearance. They believed they were building something for the defense of the nation. They believed this weapon would never be used casually. They believed it was a tool for the rarest, most critical situations, moments where a single individual posed an existential threat. But once a weapon exists, it creates new possibilities. Suddenly, scenarios that seemed impossible, eliminating political figures, silencing defectors, neutralizing double agents, became achievable without risk of scandal or war. And because the weapon left no trace, it fell into the most dangerous category of technology. A weapon that could be used with total deniability. No newspaper headline. No international outrage. Just a tragic death, attributed to age, stress, or fate. Inside the CIA, the weapon was known by different internal names, most of them classified. But outside the agency, especially after 1975, the public gave it a chilling title that stuck. The CIA heart attack gun. It was never meant to be seen by the public. It was never meant to be acknowledged. It was designed for a world where secrets decide the future. A world where the line between defense and assassination becomes invisible. And it might have remained buried forever, if not for one historic moment. Because in 1975, the United States government did something it had never done before. It opened its own shadows to investigation. The era of silence was ending, and the world was about to learn the truth. By the early 1970s, America was changing. Vietnam had fractured trust. Watergate had shaken the belief that leaders acted with integrity. Whispers of secret wars, political manipulation, and classified experiments leaked into the public conversation. For the first time in U.S. history, people began asking questions that had once been unthinkable. What is the CIA actually doing? Who approves its operations? How far has it gone in the name of national security? In 1975, the United States Senate created a special committee, officially named the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. History remembers it by a simpler name. The Church Committee, after its chairman, Senator Frank Church. The purpose of the committee was unprecedented. It wasn't investigating a single scandal. It was investigating the entire culture of secrecy inside America's intelligence agencies. The CIA, the NSA, the FBI, agencies built to protect the nation, were suddenly asked to open their files. Documents stamped top secret were handed to civilian lawmakers. Former operatives testified under oath. For the first time, the hidden world of covert warfare stepped into public light. The atmosphere inside the hearing room was electric. Rows of reporters filled the seats. Cameras were fixed on witnesses. Politicians leaned forward, realizing that what they were about to hear could reshape the very image of American power. On one of those days, a name appeared on the witness list that made journalists whisper to each other. Dr. Charles Sensini, CIA Technical Services. Sensini was not a politician. He was not a field agent. He was a scientist, a designer of tools no one outside the agency was supposed to know existed. When he took his seat, he looked calm, controlled, a man accustomed to working behind closed doors. Senator Frank Church began with measured questions, asking about the scope of the CIA's research. And then the conversation shifted. Church asked Sensini if the CIA had ever developed weapons designed for assassination. The room fell silent. Sensini could have evaded. He could have deflected. But he answered with 3 words that stunned the nation. We did, yes. Murmurs erupted in the audience. Journalists scribbled furiously. The senators leaned forward. Church continued, asking for details. And that was the moment that would enter history, when the CIA's heart attack gun was revealed to the world. Sensini described a device that fired a dart with a frozen toxin, invisible to autopsies, capable of inducing immediate heart failure. He explained that the dart would dissolve in the body and leave almost no trace, a perfect silent weapon. The senators listened, stunned. A government that claimed moral leadership on the global stage had designed a weapon to kill without being caught. A government built on democratic values had created the means to remove enemies with invisible violence. To dramatize the testimony, the committee produced a physical example of the device. A small pistol, almost ordinary in appearance, hooked to a hose that fed compressed gas. It didn't look like a gun. It looked like a tool, a small mechanical instrument. And that was the point. The public watching on television could hardly believe what they were seeing. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. It wasn't a rumor. It was real. Admitted under oath. Revealed in a Senate hearing. America wasn't just confronting hidden actions. It was confronting hidden capability, the ability to kill invisibly. For many, this moment changed everything they believed about the Cold War. It wasn't just a battle of ideology, it was a battle fought with tools the public was never meant to understand. And yet, the most haunting question of all was never answered in that hearing. Had the weapon ever been used? Senator Church asked it, directly. Senseney paused. He said the device was tested, but he claimed he had no knowledge of its operational use. He stated that decisions about deployment were above his level. The room understood the implication. Maybe the gun had never been fired at a human target. Or maybe that knowledge was buried under layers of classification that no one in that room could penetrate. The hearing didn't end the mystery, it created one. A weapon designed to erase evidence left no evidence of its own history. So the public was left with a chilling uncertainty. If death leaves no trace, how can anyone ever know when it was used? In the days following the hearing, the headlines made it sound like a political earthquake. CIA admits possession of assassination weapon. Senate shows gun that kills without a trace. Silent death, CIA weapon uncovered. For millions of Americans watching at home, this was the moment the Cold War transformed from a distant geopolitical chess match into something intimate. Something that could reach into hotel rooms, offices, streets, and homes. The CIA suddenly found itself exposed in a way it had never experienced. It had operated for nearly 3 decades without public oversight. Now, its darkest tools had been shown on national television. Behind closed doors there was panic. Not about the existence of the weapon itself, but about what the revelation meant. Former operatives, now retired, worried that questions would begin emerging about old missions, old deaths, old collapses that had been written off as natural. Diplomats in foreign countries watched nervously, imagining what this weapon implied about the United States' moral authority. And at the highest levels of government, officials struggled to contain the narrative. The official position emerged quickly. Yes, the weapon existed. No, it was never used. It was only developed as a defensive prototype. This explanation had one purpose: to close the door. Because the more people asked questions, the more dangerous those questions became. Did world leaders die naturally? Did journalists suffer sudden health failures by chance? Could defectors, whistleblowers, or political dissidents have been erased quietly? The truth, even if innocent, would never satisfy suspicion. To the public, the CIA's assurance sounded hollow. To intelligence insiders, it sounded like a necessary lie. And to historians, it sounded like the beginning of a mystery that would never be solved. The Church Committee's report didn't just reveal a device, it revealed a philosophy. The United States, in the pursuit of national security, had built tools that bypassed morality. The weapon itself was terrifying. But the mindset behind it was even more chilling. It wasn't a rogue project. It wasn't a mistake. It was the logical endpoint of a Cold War doctrine built on deniability. A bullet creates evidence. A bomb leaves debris. But a heart stopping? That creates tragedy, and then silence. The hearing sparked outrage, but also fascination. Universities debated the ethics of covert assassination. Journalists investigated old cases with new eyes. Former intelligence officers traded rumors. And everywhere the same haunting question echoed. How many deaths looked natural, but weren't? The truth, if it existed, was buried in secure archives, deep beneath layers of classification that even senators couldn't reach. And so, the aftermath of 1975 was not clarity. It was ambiguity, the most powerful fuel for conspiracy. The government had admitted the weapon existed, but it refused to open the files that would answer the questions everyone feared. The CIA insisted the heart attack gun had never been used operationally. But outside official channels, stories began to circulate. Rumors appeared in European intelligence circles, whispered over late-night drinks between retired officers. Historians collecting Cold War stories heard strange anecdotes. Journalists digging through archives found redacted reports that hinted at something more. None of it was confirmed. All of it was unsettling. One story involved a diplomat in a Latin American country, a man who had secretly negotiated with both the Soviets and the Americans. According to the whispers, he was scheduled to share sensitive information that could embarrass Washington. Days before the meeting, he collapsed in his residence. The cause? Acute cardiac failure. No autopsy was performed. Another story focused on Eastern Europe, a high-ranking military officer who planned to defect to the West. He died suddenly in a train station. His heart simply stopped. The KGB blamed stress. Western intelligence blamed fate. But some whispered a different theory. Then there were the cases that involved scientists, specifically those researching nuclear technology. One collapsed during a presentation. Another died on a flight. Both deaths were labeled natural. Both men were known to be targets for foreign recruitment. None of these stories had evidence. No document exists that definitively links the heart attack gun to any death. But that's exactly the point. If the weapon worked as designed, there would be no evidence. The absence of proof was not reassurance, it was a void. Historians tried to analyze statistics. They looked at sudden deaths with geopolitical consequences. They studied patterns, timelines, and case files. But without forensic ability to detect toxins like saxitoxin decades later, conclusions remained impossible. Even if the weapon had been used, the truth may be lost forever. Inside the intelligence community, a saying emerged. If you can't prove it happened, it never happened. And so, theories lived in a space between belief and fear, not because the public had wild imaginations, but because the government had admitted enough to make the unbelievable, believable. The heart attack gun proved something beyond its physical existence. The ability to kill without leaving a story. And once people understood that was possible, history itself became uncertain. What if entire political eras were shaped by deaths we never questioned? What if leaders fell not from health, but from invisible conflict? The weapon made every tragedy suspicious. It made every heart attack a potential assassination. And that idea, more than the gun itself, changed the world. In the years after the Church Committee, ethicists and historians tried to understand the deeper meaning of what had been revealed. The existence of a weapon like the heart attack gun wasn't just a story about laboratories and toxins. It was a story about power, how governments justify their actions in the shadows, away from public oversight. The central question was philosophical. Can a democracy survive if it adopts the methods of its enemies? When the United States fought fascism in World War II, it defined itself by contrast, a nation that upheld law, transparency, and the value of human life. But in the Cold War, the lines blurred. If the enemy used poison, the logic said, America must too. If the enemy silenced dissidents, America must be prepared to strike back. If the enemy fought with hidden tools, the United States couldn't afford to stay visible. This was the psychology of survival, a psychology that corrupted its own ideals. And the heart attack gun was the symbol of that transformation. To kill with a weapon that disappears means removing honor from warfare. It removes risk, responsibility, and consequence. It transforms death into an administrative decision, a silent solution to political problems. Ethicists called it the beginning of technocratic violence, killing not as an act of passion or war, but as a calculated tool of management. Some argued it was moral if it prevented greater conflict. Others argued it was immoral because it bypassed justice. The most chilling part wasn't the weapon. It was the decision-making process. Who chooses who dies? What criteria are used? What if they're wrong? What if the weapon is abused? In a democracy, power is supposed to be accountable. But in covert operations, accountability dissolves. The heart attack gun forced society to confront the reality that governments operate multiple layers of truth. The public truth, what citizens are told. The political truth, what leaders know. And the classified truth, where decisions are made. And between these layers lies a void where ethics rarely survive. The weapon wasn't just a scientific achievement. It was a moral warning. A warning that, if technology allows violence without consequence, the temptation to use it becomes irresistible. Today, the CIA heart attack gun is more than an object. It is a symbol of the shadow side of modern intelligence. The physical device shown in 1975 is locked away, preserved like a relic of a darker age. Its value is no longer practical, it's historical. But its legacy lives on in two ways. First, in technology. Modern science has advanced far beyond the crude methods of the 1960s. Biological agents can now be engineered with precision. Forensic detection has improved, but so has the science of invisibility. The race that began with toxin continues today under different names. Second, in imagination. The world now knows that invisible weapons are possible. No one can look at a sudden death of a high-profile figure without asking questions. No one can hear about a collapse of a political opponent without thinking of the unseen forces that may be involved. This doesn't mean every tragedy is an assassination, but it means we live in a reality where assassination can look like tragedy. The weapon opened a door that can never be closed, the door to doubt. And for intelligence agencies everywhere, it is a paradox. A weapon that kills without a trace, leaves a legacy that can never disappear. Even if the gun was never fired, its existence changed the public's trust forever. Because once you reveal that a government can kill without consequences, the question will always remain. Did it? When? To whom? In that sense, the heart attack gun is not a device. It is a question mark etched into history. The Church Committee didn't solve a mystery. It created one that spans decades, archives and graves. And to this day, every time a public figure dies suddenly, somewhere in the world someone whispers. Was it natural, or was it the silent weapon? The truth may never be known. And maybe, that was always the point. The CIA heart attack gun. A weapon that fired bullets of poison frozen in silence. A gun that didn't just kill bodies, but erased the very fact of killing. Revealed in 1975. Documented. Debated. But never fully explained. A weapon born of Cold War fear, designed for a world where death could come silently and leave no trace. In the end, perhaps that's the oldest secret of all. The dead speak only if we remember to listen.